what I also want to say is that, you know, in the general discussion, the main question, or at least one of the main questions, is cancer. And of course, for anyone getting a cancer tumor, that's dramatic, and for their loved ones and relatives and friends and so on. I don't discuss that. But if we look on the question about health effects of electromagnetic fields, maybe cancer is maybe the least important issue, you know. The big question marks, as we talked about previously, is effects, for instance, on the capacity to get babies, on fertility, effects on the immune system. We have effects on bacteria, effects on plants, and so on. That kind of issues are much more important. And also the overall subjective influences. If everyone gets high tension blood pressure, or headaches, or a deficit in sleeping quality, or alterations of the electric fields of the brain, the EEG, that's much more serious. But you have very little debate about that, particularly in the public. It's a sort of straightforward focus on cancer, and sometimes I get the feeling that maybe there isn't any connection to cancer whatsoever, or if there is, it's a very, very slight connection. We're talking about rare cancer forms, very few extra cases. Society could take that, you know, that's not a problem. But if, for instance, all the bees would disappear, all the tomato plants would be damaged, or something like this, or if you have an infertility problem in 150 years ahead of us, Jesus, they are the big issues to be discussed and also investigated. And there is an enormous concentration, also money-wise, on long-run type of epidemiological cancer investigations, and maybe one should take some of this money and do some clear-cut experiments. And I often have the feeling that whatever is sort of driving this division of money flow, whatever is driving that, maybe they are the most afraid of this sort of pinprick experiments that will have the mental balloon to explode. And they are happy, it's all right to do these long-term exposure controls and measurements and technical investigations, and also the epidemiology regarding cancer, but it's not okay to investigate, for instance, then the fertility or bacteria or bird migration patterns or whatever.
I have three, I would say, comments. Or when we talk about cancer, I normally call it big cancer, big money, but it confirms what Professor Dr. Carlo has said about. Actually, I'm sad to say, but the Danish Cancer Register has not been updated since 2001.
No, I know that.
Yeah. And that's critical, because then it's old data they're using, and it's very thin reports they make when you go through it or others go through it. And then when we talk about symptoms. What about stress? We have mega stress, and when we talk about EEG and vibrations from the pulsations,
and all these burnout phenomena, and as you say, this enormous stress, you know.
And then number 3 about infertility. There was this movie coming out in early 2007 called Children of Men, and it was put like going for the Oscars or something like that. But it's actually a scenario playing out in 2027, when the youngest person on Earth dies, and he's 18 years old. And that means in 2009, women will not be able to have children anymore. And it's actually a scenario that is possible when we look at the situation today.
Well, it is, and particularly if you look in the scientific literature, I mean, that's really scary. If I was the health minister in Sweden or Denmark or somewhere else, I would get extremely stressed by that fact, as I would be for other findings regarding, for instance, the key cells, the so-called mast cells, in allergy, asthma, and oversensitivities, and the effects of mobile irradiation of these cells, which is dramatic, really, all the data regarding the functional impairment, electrohypersensitivity, and so on. You have the data regarding short-term memory deficits, concentration capacity decrease, and so on. I would be extremely scared. But it seems as if mankind has, sometimes I feel an active death wish. You never see other species sort of constructing the future in such a way, Other species, they want to thrive and survive and develop and be in their area of biology. But sometimes I feel that it's a game going on, and in this game we are playing with our own future. And again, it would be pretty easy to prove me wrong if we would do these kind of crucial experiments. But at the same time, it could also prove me right. And maybe that's the scary part,
I think the industry is making some kind of 2,000 billion kronas a year.
Yeah, I know. There's an enormous revenue. Yeah. And also, they could, in that sense, of course, be one of several that could chip off a very, very small piece of the block, and give it to independent research. And if they don't want to do it, or for some political reason, then why not governments? I mean, like in Sweden or in Denmark, but we can stay in Sweden now. Sweden is an extremely rich country, I mean, we are extremely rich. People could do, buy, and so on, nearly whatever they want to, And people have food and clothes and so on in a vast overflow. And of course there are money enough to support this kind of research. But it's a priority issue.
Yeah, and the problem today is that you can say that the mobile industry and the government has melded together. So it's like...
it's hard for me to say that, but I mean, there are in Sweden very clear-cut evidence for such a melting together, as you say, and at various levels. And that is, of course, not the way it should be. The government and the parliament should be completely devoid of any ties to the private industry, as should be the various authorities. And in Sweden they are not. They are publishing papers together, actually, where more of the authors come from the industry than from the authority. Yeah. And it's of course hard to believe that this does not influence the outcome. And I remember some years ago there was a television team here from one of the digging journalist programs in Sweden, and he put out like 100 publications on a long table when it came to me, and then they let the camera go sideways, filming each one of these published papers, and then the reporter said in the microphone, "We have just been to the Swedish Radiation Protection Authority. They say that there are no proof of any harm whatsoever. Now we are across the road at the Karolinska Institute and the Ole Johansson's research group, and here there is an infinite number of such papers, There are so many."